Although in third place, we had twice the audience of the first place evening news broadcast today.
Today, right, exactly.
And as I say, Ted and Peter and others, we didn't realize we were so bad.
Right.
We did realize if we'd stood up for a story with our one camera crew, CBS would have its three, and its helicopter or someone to take the, in those days, film.
Right, and the camera was this
we'd
big.
We'd jump on the back of a motorcycle or something to take our film in. We realized we were sort of outgunned.
Right.
But it was when Roone Arledge came. He brought us money, he brought us airtime, and he brought us an esprit. And of course, he said to himself, if these clunks who worked for ABC News had been any good, they'd be number one. So he tried to hire everybody else.
Yeah,
and
well,
so he made millionaires of Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, Roger Mudd, a whole bunch of people.
He had one very important success, though, when he hired David Brinkley.
Well, he hired David Brinkley. David Brinkley was not appreciated anymore at NBC.
No, it's
although
true.
he and Chet Huntley had had the largest audience ever to this date in television
corner
news
office
history.
and nothing to do.
Yeah, because the guy who was then running, I remember his name, but mercifully I'm not going to embarrass him by giving it. I somehow thought David Brinkley was over the hill. David was 61. And our own Leonard Goldenson, who founded ABC, wrote in his autobiography that he was against the hiring of David Brinkley because he thought he was too old. But Roone Arledge, who had his complete confidence if Roone wanted to do it, and so Roone did it, and David did his program on ABC 1 year longer than the Huntley-Brinkley report was on NBC.
That's interesting.
And Leonard Goldenson
He had a
wrote
much
also
bigger
in his
career.
autobiography, I was wrong, and Roone was right.
And Roone came in with a lot of controversy because he came from ABC Sports. And there was a hue and cry even within ABC, you know, how can we have this? He's going to ruin the news division. He's not going to have any values. But it turned out to be that he ended up making a news division like no other. Wouldn't you agree?
I do.
You know?
I think some of us were not against Roone. We were agnostic. We didn't know. But one thing
were doubtful.
we did know was he was a winner.
Yeah.
You want to go with winners if you can. Now, sometimes you can't because they've won the wrong way or they've got the wrong values. But you want to look for winners in life.
Yeah.
On the stock market, for instance, which today is almost impossible.
Yeah, we don't really want to look at the stock
That's
market
right.
right now, do we?
And Roone was a winner. He had created ABC Sports out of whole cloth,
Yeah.
bought the Olympics, made it the huge television spectacular it was, persuaded the NFL, why should we only watch football games on Sunday?
Yeah.
Why not watch them on Monday night?
Yeah.
And Pete Rozelle said, well, okay, if you'll pay the freight. Roone said, money here, money's like confetti. Here, take what you want. Created a wide world of sports, the thrill of victory, that skier with
He
the
made
agony
stars.
of defeat.
Especially he made stars.
He understood that whether it's news, whether it's sports, anything, you have to be interesting. My first rule of life now is life is too short to associate with dull people. Why would you want to do that?
That's why you're here.
Well, they're very kind. And Roone said, you know, we want people not dull. But he proved that that would not be a rule that he would put above people who were responsible,
Right.
knew what they were talking about, and who could be trusted.
What were your first encounters with him? I mean, what beat were you on when he came
Well,
in?
I was lucky. Peter Jennings and I were both lucky. Peter, the late Peter Jennings, a great correspondent and anchor for us, wangled a cushy deal to go to the 1972 Munich Olympics. He knew he wouldn't have anything to do except enjoy life and, you know, the companionship of,
Right.
he was single in those days
Yes.
and all that, because ABC Sports would be doing the Olympics. But when Black September kidnapped the Israeli
In Munich.
Olympic athletes,
Right.
Peter was the only one there who knew what this group was.
Yeah.
He knew the Middle East. And Roone watched him in action and marked him down. And I was lucky because in 1976 I was covering Jimmy Carter at the convention in New York City. Governor Carter made his acceptance speech, and then I walked up and started interviewing him. Roone was waiting for the convention to end so he could put on a sports program for the West Coast. And he watched this, who's this guy? He's ABC, oh, ABC News? What's he doing? Where are the CBS and NBC? Well, they were waiting in the wings. I've often believed that waiting in the wings is the wrong place to be when any action is going on. I tell young journalism students, if you sit in the press room and politely hold up your hand to wait to be recognized, you're not going to be called on. Get in there.
When was the first time you shouted at a president?
Well, you see, I never shout.
Sam.
All right, I never interviewed or asked a question of John F. Kennedy, but beginning with Lyndon Johnson, I did. No one ever heard me shout at Lyndon Johnson or Richard Nixon, although I was not the White House correspondent.
Right.
I interviewed him. Or Jimmy Carter. I was the. Ronald Reagan couldn't hear well. Now you had two choices. You could politely stand behind the rope, like a good little.
Well, and he'd keep the helicopter blades
Well,
going.
not
too.
ever the blade, see, because the president is
The engines.
there.
Yeah.
The engine.
The engine.
And sometimes when he heard a question he wanted to answer, he'd come right over and do so. But you had two
Then he
choices.
could
you
hear.
Could either be very polite and watch, or you could ask him a question. And so to ask him a question, you'd have to raise your voice. But it will be on my tombstone. He shouted at Ronald Reagan.
Hey, but you don't regret that.
And
You
I
got the
covered
job done.
Bill Clinton in his second term. I didn't shout at Bill Clinton.
No.
Of course, during the time I covered him was a bad time.
Yeah, for him.
Monica, and he wasn't answering questions much at all.
Oh, he heard every one of them, though. His hearing was just fine. We'll get to him in just a. We'll get to him in
Yeah,
just
you got
a
to
second.
get to Papa.
But with Reagan, you got a little dance going there, where he knew what you were up to, and you knew what he was up to, and it worked for both of you.
Well, I knew he was president of the United States, and I wasn't. I understood that I was never on any plane with
Yeah.
him. But I used to say, in some senses, it was like two hams discovering each other and playing with each other. I was the straight man, and he provided the one-line quip, or he provided the answers. Because I think with almost any person that you're interviewing, but particularly a president, they have to have the last word. Even though you think of something that I'll top him. No.
Yeah.
You do not argue to the point where you're trying to one-up a president. It's not only bad form, but from the standpoint of the viewer, they're not going to tolerate that.
Yeah, you think it'll always be like that? I wonder.
Well,
In a TMZ world, I wonder.
I don't know. I've heard a
know.
lot of, would I have asked Bill Clinton whether he wore boxers or briefs?
I
Probably
know.
not.
I just can't see you doing that. But
Although a wonderful print reporter named George Skelton, who worked for the LA Times, once interviewed Ronald Reagan, and asked him whether he was still enjoying sex.
marital relations.
Marital relations
Yeah.
or something. I would not have asked that.
No. As the years go on, anything goes. I want to go back to just something personally before we get on to the bigger stage of the political scene right now, because I was very interested when I read this about you. You are a devoted New Mexican, I guess it
Yeah,
would be fair to
that's
say.
true.
That is probably where your heart
fair
is.
New Mexico. Oh, how I love you so.
You live here in D.C., but you have how many acres in New Mexico?
Well, can I talk just a moment about my father?
Yes, absolutely.
My father was born in 1871. Ulysses Grant was president of the United States
That's
when my
wonderful.
father was born. I didn't say grandfather or great-grandfather.
No, I hear you.
And he bought his first piece of farmland in the New Mexico Territory in 1910.
Yeah.
I come from a farming and ranching family. He hasn't been, for several decades, he's not been running anything. And I was the black sheep who came east. I want to make that point, because people can say anything about me they want, as long as they smile, the Texan. But when I hear people say, I just got rich and he bought land and no, that's the family business. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, and I
Yeah.
still try to run it today.
And you stayed true to it. I remember you saying to me once when we were having one of our meetings before doing the show, and somebody was going, Sam, you've got how many thousands of acres? And you said, you've got to understand 1,000 acres in New Mexico isn't what it is in
Let me tell
Washington,
you,
D.C., but
one
how
section
many?
of land, 640 acres, in a good year, you can run 15 animal units. That's 15 cows and calves, or 5 times the sheep. We don't have any sheep. We had sheep briefly in
Don't have
1991
sheep,
and
you're saying?
92, and people still stop me in the street and they grin and say, "Oh, how's the sheep? How's the subsidy that you're getting from the federal government? My tax
Oh,
dollars
yeah,
for the
yeah,
sheep."
yeah. You and your
I
subsidies.
want to take the microphone and knock them in the head.
Well, anything goes these days. Just remember, nothing's sacred.
Well, let me tell you about land in New Mexico. Ted Turner owns 1,273,000 acres in New Mexico alone.
And you own what's
That's not
left.
his total holding in the world.
Right, no.
And I tell people our spread is somewhat smaller.
You don't want to get into the numbers, do you? But it's a cattle ranch now.
The cattle, yes.
And it was interesting to me that here you have covered wars, you've covered all kinds. I mean, you know news, and you know it from all sides. But you were in the news. You came home one day to your ranch, and you had a foreman, and he lived on the ranch with his wife and daughter and son. And you came home one day and discovered carnage, a murder.
Well,